Thank you. And Commissioner, if you...
Hey, we ready, Marcia?
Yeah, if you want to start, that would be great.
Let's do it. Okay, welcome all those online on Zoom this afternoon. It is Wednesday, December 13th, 2023. It's 1:18 p.m. in the afternoon. This is our quarterly meeting of the WFEDD Economic Development District for the Wasatch Front Regional. Welcome those taking the time out to be with us this afternoon. I think we've got some productive presentations awaiting us this afternoon. So with that, let's start with the introductions. Rosie, if you wouldn't mind taking roll so we know who is with us this afternoon. Rosie, listening to us?
Yeah, it looks like maybe.
Did we lose her?
Oh, can you hear me?
There we go.
There you are.
Okay.
Oh,
Go,
my apologies.
go ahead, Rosie.
Oh, okay, Commissioner. We have Marcia White, Greg Bisping, Ted Knowlton, Sarah Tolliver, Chris Sloan, Scott Cuthbertson, Ginger Chin, Ryan Smith, Jordan Chandler, Che Mosqueda, Amanda Tullis, Alan Matheson, Commissioner Blaine Fackrell, Randy Elliott, Muriel Sochimel. We have someone from Fireflies.ai. Oh, okay, that looks like a AI note taker. Chris Roybal, Kimberly Rivers, Sarah Lawless, and Sherry Stevens. That's all I see, Commissioner. Back to you.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Rosie, for doing that. With that, the way of introductions, let's take our first action item. That action item would be the approval of the October 23rd, 2023 minutes for that meeting. I'd look for a motion to approve those minutes.
Motion to approve.
We have a motion. Was that Commissioner Fackrell?
I'll
Chris Roybal.
second. This
That
is
was
Ginger
great.
Chin.
Okay, we had a motion. Did we get a second, Rosie?
I will second it, but I wasn't there.
Okay. All right. We'll still take that
Oh.
second. With that,
The motion was, oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
The motion was Chris Roybal, and the second was Commissioner Fackrell.
Correct.
got it. Okay. Thank you for correcting that. With that, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Appreciate it. Any opposed? I'll rule the motion carries. Let's go to our chair's report, which deals with the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy. We call that the SIDS. As everybody that's online today understands that we spent a good part of last year, well, I should say this year, almost last year, 2023, dealing with the SIDS and getting that ready to get reviewed and approved by the Economic Development Administration in DC. It just came through this last week or so that Marcia sent that the EDA, Economic Development Administration in DC, did approve that, reviewed it for the regional 2023-2028 regional SIDS. And they especially highlighted, I think this is important to note, some comments about the well-developed evaluation framework that was put with it, the metrics for each task that we included with that, so it was an understandable. We had measurable metrics that we have to accomplish. And then from the previous conversations, we know that quite a bit of time was spent on each task and not only developing the implementation goals, but also linking those strategies to specific outcomes. And that's what we really wanted to accomplish, is put together a plan that had definable outcomes that were measurable, that we had a goal to shoot for. So, Marcia, I wanted to thank anybody and everybody that was involved with that. You were probably the lead person on that. It's great to see this take place. I'm excited to see what may transpire over the next several years as this unrolls. With that, let's go to public comment. Anyone online,
Commissioner,
from members of the public that would like to? Yeah.
could I make just
Go
a
ahead.
real quick comment? Oftentimes the EDA
Yeah, go
will
ahead.
come back with quite a few different corrections to the SEDS, and it was just a few of them, and most of them, one of them was a spelling error, and the other three were actually very complimentary as far as what we did. And so kudos to the group that took time to really, sit down with, whether you were on a focus group or the surveys or the interviews, and really helped to establish and put this together. So it was a fun process, and now the fun work gets to going. So anyway, sorry, I just wanted to say that, and thank you to everyone that worked on this.
That's great. Yeah, and I'm excited as this rolls out, like I said, and especially the work that you've done, other people that participated in those working groups, the implementation of those strategies and outcomes. So anybody else like to comment on the SIDS before we move forward? All right, let's go to public comment. Anyone online that would like to give public comment related to the agenda or anything dealing with the WFEDD?
Mr. Chair.
All right,
this is
seeing
Andrew.
none.
This is Andrew. I don't want to give any public comment. I just arrived late. I apologize. I just wanted to say hello and thanks everybody for joining.
Good to see you, Andrew. Good to see you. Okay. All right, with that, let's go to our presentations, which is our main objective, our agenda items today, if we might. And as we move forward in the future, and we just talked about the SIDS and what's going to happen, what we hope will take place over the next few years with that comprehensive economic development strategy. We're going to, and as we implement those recommendations, we want to bring information to the stakeholders, basically members of this, the WFRC, obviously our local units of government, our counties and our mayors. And as far as what those strategy recommendations are, we want to focus today on the two main objectives I think that we would all agree on, the two main strategies of that SIDS. The first one being what we call refined objectives for business recruitment. Basically, I would classify that as how do we deal with businesses that we'd like to have come into our community, either existing businesses that are looking to expand, or new businesses that may be looking to relocate or locate in this region, this area. The other part would be what we call labor force participation, which is really, okay, where do we come up if we have those companies come in? Where do we come up? How do we get the labor force necessary to run these companies? And so without labor, we don't really have a good environment to encourage these companies either to expand or to come into our area. So the labor force, how do we get that? How do we strengthen the capacity? And the end result, how do we get good paying jobs? So we're going to hear from two experts in the field on that today. We're going to start with Mr. Scott Cusperson. He's the president and CEO of EDC Utah. I've had the opportunity to work with him some on the Northern Utah Economic Alliance with Chris Roybal. He's really got a great history. He's a leading team of really great individuals, talented individuals to catalyze and really bring the quality jobs, what I would call the good paying jobs I just mentioned, into our state. Capital investment, and really looking at the strategic economic opportunities that we offer, kind of being unique in Utah. He previously worked as a management consultant director with PwC, where he advised clients across several industries on multi-billion-dollar capital investment projects around the globe. In addition, he served as the COO and deputy executive director of the Point Utah. And I think everybody understands the Point Utah is one of the largest and most compelling economic development projects in the country, definitely what we've seen in this state. So, Scott, appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day to be with us. I'm going to turn the time over to you to talk about strategic planning and where we go from here.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to Marcia and Andrew also for offering this time to present. A lot of familiar faces on the call, and many of you may have heard this sort of strategic plan that we've been messaging for the better part of this past year. So I've actually wanted to start by giving a little bit of background for those who aren't familiar on where EDC Utah fits in the fabric of our state's economic development organizations, and also to share a little bit of data, give you a peek at what we share with companies that are looking at expanding in Utah or relocating to Utah. So let me share my screen here. And if the tech works, we'll get started. Okay, here we go. So our vision and our mission, we actually, at the beginning of the year, completed a 6-month process of reimagining what EDC Utah is about and taking stock of the changes that we've seen in the economy, in the growth that we've seen in our state, and attitudes towards economic development, and came out with this new strategic plan and rethought our vision as part of that process. And what we landed on was we're about creating a prosperous and resilient economy for generations of Utahns to come. So really being more forward thinking in terms of what economic development is, how we go about it. And our mission at the end of the day is catalyzing economic opportunity. And that's first and foremost by creating quality jobs in the state, or at least facilitating the opportunity for those to be created, attracting those jobs and those companies. Our services, again, project management for corporate recruitment, retention, and expansion. That's primarily what we're focused on, but we also have great team members and really a renewed emphasis on community strategy, which is how we work with municipalities and counties across the state of Utah. We have an in-house economic research team that does secondary, primary research. We use that to help inform companies looking at coming into the state, making the business case for Utah. We also share that with our membership base, which we call investors, share that information with them, help keep them informed on what's happening in terms of our economy. And we work on marketing, in particular to site selectors who are really the deal makers for corporate relocation expansion projects. About 600-700 of them in our network, and we routinely market to them and keep those contacts warm. We have them host them in the state and give them really the inside look at what Utah's about, and that's a big part of what we do. We also have a 501c3 foundation. We've had some different initiatives that we've worked on through that, and we'll continue in the future. We have a network of over 200 investors, private members, public sector members. It's great support that we have from them. And we work hand in hand, have a strategic public-private partnership with the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity to deliver on the corporate recruitment goals and objectives of the state. We are that intake process, white glove service to those companies on behalf of the state. And we also have a site readiness program, which some of you may be familiar with. We help communities to prepare and market large tracts of land that are to receive corporate investment and help them ready for that. So I want to walk you quickly through an overview of Utah and some of our strengths and assets that make us a great place for business, and then I'll go into more of the strategic plan. But first of all, we are really fortunate to be in a great geographic position, serviced by great infrastructure, rail, interstate highway systems, access to largest markets in the country on the West Coast, but also have a great international airport, which, as you know, has grown in size, received billions of dollars of capital investment. That's opening up new opportunities in international markets. We are the 19th busiest airport in the country. We truly are the crossroads of the West, and that is to our advantage in economic development for logistics and for access to trade. We're a growing population. This group well knows this. We have grown at 3 times the national average. In 2020, 62% of that came from in-migration rather than from babies being born in Utah. We're expected to double our population by 2065, and we are the youngest state in the nation at 32 years of age. bodes well for economic development. If you look at our workforce, we're young and active. We have 2.7% unemployment rate. That's great on the one hand. On the other hand, it makes it hard to grow. So there's a renewed emphasis on workforce development, and we want to be tapped into that. We have great labor force participation, and we're now the 30th largest state at 3.4 million people, compared to the early 1980s when we were the 36th largest. So we've really grown and diversified our economy. We're educated. We have over 265,000 students enrolled in our university systems, and we are globally minded. We punch above our weight, certainly in that area. 120 languages spoken in Utah, and a third of our workforce speak a second language. So it's really impressive. For this group, who's really attuned to what's happening on the Wasatch Front, we market the Wasatch Front, and it may not be as known. It isn't as known outside of Utah, sort of the demographic within this geographic region. It's about where 75% of our population is. It's, as you know, it's the center of economic and cultural activity in the state. When you compare us to other markets, it puts it into perspective. So the MSA along the Wasatch Front is comparable to Orlando, to Charlotte, North Carolina, Cleveland, and Sacramento. Our 5-year population growth is 3 times the national average. I'd say one thing that is sort of changing in terms of economic development recruitment into Utah, whereas before companies thought of us as Salt Lake, didn't know much about cities beyond that, we see a lot of activity across the Wasatch Front now, realizing that they can have access to our capital city and that talent base, but also the talent that's spread along the Wasatch Front, and access to an international airport within reasonable driving distance. We'll talk a little bit about the business environment.
Hey, Scott,
Yes.
I can't resist interjecting just very briefly on the point that you just made about access around the entirety of the Wasatch Front. I just want to point out that that is in part where the overlap occurs with the work that WFRC does, the Wasatch Choice Vision, coordinating where development is located, where people live, where they work, and the transportation system. That is one of those sort of points of intersection between the work that EDCU does and the work that WFRC does, of all of us working together, have this thriving region.
Spot on. Thanks, Andrew, for bringing that point home. And we'll talk a little more about how we anticipate working a little more closely with the AOGs across the state as part of our pivot, strategic pivot towards the end. But quickly want to go over just a few metrics here. We're a great place for business. That's no secret. We have the 8th best business climate, tax climate in the country. Whereas before we were sort of set up more for that arbitrage play of a lower cost market. That's still the case on wages if you're looking at companies coming in from the coast. Less so on real estate. We still are somewhat more competitive in those markets, but it's not as prominent as it was before. We are a very diverse, in terms of economic respects, a very diverse market, the 5th most diverse in the country, as a matter of fact. So no longer a extraction state, oil, gas, mining as you were in the 80s, but really diverse across sectors. And we have those targeted industries that we focus on. That's the state's target industry program of aerospace and defense, advanced manufacturing, technology, financial services, life sciences, but also other sectors that we're strong in. And touch briefly on a couple of generational opportunities that feature in our strategic plan going forward. The Point of the Mountain Land Authority, generational opportunities, 600 acres, the intersection of Salt Lake and Utah counties, really a forward-thinking type of planned community, innovation community, where new businesses will come into the state that we haven't seen before, that will create an ecosystem that will really bring economic value, new economic value to the state. But it's also an example of how to grow in a smart way, and being a walkable community served by transit and really high quality of life amenities. And the inland port, which has pivoted in its own right this past year and becoming really an economic engine or vehicle to serve communities across the state of Utah. We at EDCU have a strategic partnership with the inland port. We have a full-time project manager focused on representing the port and bringing companies into port project areas. We're excited about that. And then have to mention what's happening at Hill Air Force Base. As many of you know, the thousands of jobs created there, really on the back of the new intercontinental ballistic missile program, sort of a 2.0 there that Northrop's running. That ecosystem alone at Hill Air Force Base generates $9 billion of economic impact annually, which is enormous. And I think it counts for 20% of the economic opportunity or revenue generated in the state. I quickly want to go on to some of the high level trends that we're hearing as we benchmark with our peers across the country, other economic development organizations. There's really a sea change in the industrial policy that we're seeing globally. So this is the reshoring of manufacturing back to the US and to contiguous markets, pulling out of China. There's the energy transition from fossil fuels to alternative energy sources, all of which is being supported by literally trillions of dollars, $1.9 trillion in federal incentives to support that. The Texas Instruments win of $11 billion that you heard about earlier in the year, that came in no small part because of the CHIPS and Science Act supporting it. And that'll affect our economy for a generation to come. So there are major opportunities out there that we want to be tapped into so that we're not that we don't lose our number one spot as the top economy in the country. There's a workforce shortage, not just in Utah. This is happening across the country. EDOs are looking at ways to solve that, whether it's through immigration, through providing better childcare solutions to bring women back into the workforce. Grid constraints is another prominent challenge across the country, and we're seeing it come in Utah as well. This is driven by automation, artificial intelligence. A data center used to take 3 megawatts to power an Amazon distribution facility. With all the robots and technology in there now, it's a 10 megawatt project to bring in one of those facilities. So that's stretching the generation capacity in our transmission system, and is not something unique to Utah. We're seeing it across the country. Growth management. This is really what has featured in our new strategy in terms of rethinking how we do economic development. We are less affordable as a state. There's a housing crisis that's seen across certainly the Intermountain West, but we feel it acutely in Utah. Water, obviously a big challenge. Transportation, this group is well tied into our transportation needs. And then how we address the anti-growth sentiment that you find in different quarters in the state. That's not unique to Utah either. Our EDO partners across the country are seeing that. And I want to mention regionalization. So this is how communities are coming together to really team up to capture key opportunities, whether that's at a multinational level. And you see that with Utah reaching out to Mexico, led by the governor, and to the UK, signing strategic trade agreements. You see it at the multi-state level, where we're talking with Idaho, talking with Arizona to collaborate on creating a semiconductor chip belt, if you will, leveraging our assets and workforce across those areas to meet the demands that we see. And then county partnerships. The Northern Utah Economic Alliance is a wonderful example of how that can work well for multiple counties coming together, putting aside maybe the competitive differences and seeing how they can work together in a way that benefits both counties. So that's a trend that we're seeing as well. I'll just quickly run through some KPIs that may be of interest to the group, and then we'll get into the actual strategy. But I thought you'd be interested to know we're seeing a ton of economic activity, so lots of projects. We didn't anticipate that coming into this fiscal year with the headwinds that we see out in the economy, but we've landed a lot of project wins, and you see that translating into thousands of jobs, lots of square footage absorption, and then tracking to 700 million capital investment halfway through the year. This is a month, the data by a month, so we're a little ahead in each of these metrics, but looking very strong halfway into this fiscal year. We haven't seen as many projects in the pipeline, although we still have a robust pipeline, but we're seeing more deals being closed. And the majority of those projects are in manufacturing, no surprise there, but you do see activity across other sectors, life science, aerospace and defense, energy, Some of those are manufacturing related, but specific to those sectors. And I want to touch on rural. That is a focus of the governor's and feeds into our strategy in the future as well. The Red TIF program, the Rural Economic Development Tax Incentive program, is really paying dividends for rural Utah. 46% of our projects last year, fiscal year 22-23, went to rural communities. And so they weren't the largest in terms of job opportunities, but you do see a lot of CapEx and a lot of projects, including those on this list here, going into those communities. So nearly 800 million CapEx, 850 jobs. One of those I wanted to feature quickly was Lakeshore Learning. This is an educational products company. They sell school materials, books, desks across the country, and they have broke ground on a $220 million facility in Garland, Utah, in Box Elder County. It's going to create 540 jobs. So big boon for that rural community. And we're focusing on how we can leverage in economic development some of these strategically important opportunities across rural Utah, whether it's mega sites, green energy, the Uinta Basin project, and the port project areas that are being set up. Okay, now to our strategic pivot. So as I mentioned, we went through a process of rethinking EDC Utah's role really and how we bring business to Utah, how we strengthen the economy. And the reason we did that was multifold. So there are obviously the growth challenges we talked about. We know we have a workforce shortage. There are economic headwinds. There's this move toward, as part of that industrial policy, big CapEx investments that are coming into the US. And we see other fiscally conservative states like Idaho, like Texas, South Carolina, Tennessee, going after those investments and winning those investments. And so we want to be competing for those as well. Our geographic scope, we're unique in that we have a statewide mandate. A lot of EDOs have a really a metropolitan focus and scope, but we're fortunate to have a statewide one, and that has several advantages to it, but also has some challenges in terms of how we deliver services to urban and rural Utah. That's the needs are very different. And then untapped opportunity, how we can take advantage of our resources and deliver more for Utah. Let me just summarize that plan this way. So there's some things we need to do internally to continue to reimagine how we deliver services to rural Utah. It's not just corporate recruitment. That model doesn't meet the needs of a Panguitch, or pick your small rural community. It may be more about mainstream development. The governor's office has hired outreach managers to service different rural communities. We obviously have AOGs involved as well. And we have a value proposition that we're refining and want to offer to those communities also. Importantly, the pivot to prosperity. So we no longer need to focus on raw job growth. Now we're going to be proactive, and we're not going to let our foot off the pedal on going after the important strategic opportunities. But we need to consider quality of life. We need to consider our infrastructure, our water, our workforce as part of that process. And we play a role in that through educating and informing. We think that's how we best serve that need. It's taking our position and working with site selectors and businesses coming into Utah, working with our research and data team, benchmarking with other states and their EDOs, and providing this information that's valuable to the broad group of stakeholders in the state that are focused on achieving economic prosperity. And then finally, it's owning our story. It's continuing to talk about who Utah is and talking about what makes us great. How that comes together, it's a little bit of a busy slide, but as I mentioned, EDC Utah, we benchmark, we have access to site selectors, we have great research, we share that with the state, we share that with our public-private investors, and we want to share it with the broader community. At the end of the day, local communities and the governor's office determine how we sort of go to market and recruit businesses. The intake process today is we work with site selectors, we market to them, we promote the targeted industries, those clusters, and we serve all comers. Those who come into the state, it's part of our contract to serve their needs. We are pivoting a bit to emphasize what we'll call asset-based recruitment. So an example would be how we work with the inland port, strategic partnership to recruit for those areas with the Point of the Mountain as well, and with other communities that we have partnerships with. We're also pivoting to focus a little more on foreign direct investment, given there's massive opportunity there. And we have data that show that Utah does not benefit as much as we should from that investment. The governor is leading out, again, the MOU with Mexico, with the UK, and we'll see more opportunities to come in that space. Our focus on business recruitment, retention, expansion, that includes, again, the market research, making the case to companies on why Utah, helping them with site selection, helping them to get networked, and shepherding them through the incentives process, which then the GOYO Incentives Board approves. As part of that process, there's a requirement that local communities put some skin in the game. So local communities ultimately will determine if project gets incentivized into their community. At the state level, as part of the incentives approval process, Kimsey Gardner Policy Institute is producing project folios to kind of assess the impacts from a quality of life standpoint and economic standpoint of these incentivized projects. But we want to continue to promote this as part of the plan to keep us a prosperous state into the future, secure that prosperity, bring in high-paying jobs, the thousands often of indirect jobs that come from that, the increased tax revenue, the investments that come with infrastructure, whether it's roads or rail, utilities that these companies invest, their corporate giving programs, which bring countless hours of service by their employees, or direct investments into school districts, like Texas Instruments' $9 million donation to the Alpine School District. And this ultimately creates robust ecosystems and keeps us economically relevant over time. So hopefully I haven't gone too far over, but want to pause and just take any questions that the group has.
Yeah, Scott. This is Blaine Fackrell from Morgan County. I have a question on your good paying jobs. What's considered good paying jobs?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if you look at the incentives program, there's a definition for that in order to be to receive a state incentive. If you're in an urban area, and that means you have to be providing a wage on average that's 120% of the prevailing wage in the county. Now, in rural Utah, there is no wage requirement. We want to incentivize jobs coming into rural Utah. So those are kind of the statutory definition. We're focused on bringing in jobs in those targeted industries and into rural Utah, regardless of the wage. Obviously, we'd like them to be high, but that's up for the local communities to determine.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, great question.
Any additional questions for Scott? Scott, I have one question for you. This is Gage. So you mentioned that we're closing more transactions, more companies, but there wasn't as many in the pipeline. Do you attribute that to overall interest rates, or are companies looking somewhere else than Utah right now? Do you have a take on why that pipeline may not be as full as we'd anticipated a year ago?
Yeah, we do, Commissioner, and I think you're right. It's tied to the interest rates, to the economic environment, macroeconomic environment. A lot of companies are waiting and seeing and what's going to happen. I know we heard just the other day that interest rates, may be going down later next year, but we'll see if that changes or not. But it certainly is tied to that.
Good. And what is your opinion as far as we hear, at least up in northern part of the state, water becomes a major issue. Water and obviously sewer that goes along with that, sewer capacity. Are you seeing that other municipalities, other counties are kind of looking at the same thing as the state looks at water conservation and use of that water? Is that going to impact our future growth of these companies looking at Utah? And
yeah,
so, what way?
It certainly does. It certainly does. And I think there are a couple ways to look at that. One is how local communities handle it. I think at the state level, uh, the state is taking the issue seriously. You saw that in the last two legislative sessions. They committed, $1 billion in appropriations to water resiliency. I was talking with former Speaker Wilson just the other week, and he said that he believes we're 30% of the way there on really securing the Great Salt Lake, at least. And you need another, 7 years of the same type of focus from elected officials at the state level to that. We see some companies that are passing on Utah because of water concerns. It's received a lot of national attention, and so it's not too surprising. But it will impede our long-term growth, and more than just the water. You've all heard the stories about the arsenic that's in the dust there that could be freed up, and I think that's a bipartisan issue. But in terms of EDC Utah, we see it. We want to share what we're hearing, and we want to be part of the solution as well. And we're looking at ways to do that.
Appreciate that a lot. Any other questions before we move on our agenda? Andrew, did you have anything you wanted to add to this?
I just had one question well, first of all, Scott, thank you so much for reviewing all of that with us. And you've referenced several times the relationship between private sector and public sector. And so along that line, I guess I would ask you the sort of general question of what's most helpful to the work that you're doing with your private sector partners for the public sector to do. And I think of that in terms of, tackle that however you want, but transportation agencies, planners, municipalities, do you have some sort of suggestions or requests for those of us that are public sector on this meeting?
Boy, what a great question. I don't have an answer just on the top of my head other than continue to be, available. I think when we can get public and private sector folks in a room, we can see that ultimately we have the same goals, and we can kind of inform each other on what the impediments are and what the opportunities are, and sort of help create better solutions that way. And, we want to do that by bringing together our public and private sector members, whether it's in town halls or working groups, kind of pick a specific issue and talk about what we can do together to contribute to solutions. So, that's kind of broad, but that's, I think, really the way to tackle big complex issues.
Hey, Chris Roybal. Hey, Scott, I just wanted to jump in. Well said. I think maybe just a couple of comments. I think we're going to, if the interest rates continue to stay where they are, that's affecting our ability to create more spec development, particularly on the industrial side, meaning that, these companies need a home and a place to grow. So both office and industrial, we're seeing a little bit of slowdown in spec development in northern Utah, which had been pretty heavy the last 24 months. So hopefully that interest rates will come down a bit. As an example, a small developer who's going to put up a $20 million industrial building has to come up with $6 million in cash because of the banking requirements to build that building. So that gets to be difficult unless you're a deep national developer. So we'll have to continue to watch that. But I think, so the build to suit projects are still pretty busy. Companies that want to come in and build and own their own building, those projects are pretty robust right now. So we'll have to follow that as well. But maybe another comment and question for the group, Andrew, to your question. And, what can we do on the local side? Let me give you an example up here. So in Davis and Weber County, there's about 25 municipalities. Okay, there's maybe 4 or 5 of those that have a full-time economic developer on the ground. So when we have projects, we're dealing with landowners and local city, county officials. Oftentimes we're dealing with people that, have to wear 2 or 3 hats. They're the city planner, they're the city manager, there's something else. They're jumping in to work on an economic development project. So I guess the question I have for the group is, what else can we do? We try to assist those cities up here that don't have full-time economic developers to jump in and help them. We have on our side, we do quarterly meetings with all of the city, county, chamber, tech university reps to kind of keep them in the loop as best we can. But, oftentimes they can't even come to our meetings because they're so busy with their other city business. So, and I'm glad to hear, that the governor's has increased his outreach manager groups. I know, Sherry Stevens represents our group up here, which is helping. But I guess maybe just a question for the group, what else can we do to assist the local municipalities? Because look, we can't get these deals done unless we have, that local, that local partner along with the landowners. Salt Lake County doesn't have that much of that challenge. I think most of the cities there do. Tooele County, it's an issue. I would say Utah County probably is a little bit more like it is up north, maybe half or a third. But it's an interesting challenge, and we're trying to, sort of combine all of our resources so that, we can work together as a team. But interested to hear maybe Commissioner Frower, what else the group could maybe do? What else can WFRC do as a leveraging partner to help the local municipalities that don't have that resource?
Yeah, great point, Chris. Andrew, do you have any suggestions or input on that? That is one thing we're facing, I think, across northern Utah.
Well, it's a great point. I agree. I'm maybe gonna punt that one. I'm looking here at Marcia and Ted, both of whom not only are WFRC employees, but also are members of city councils
Yeah.
in
Right.
Ogden and North Salt Lake, respectively, and not to put them on the spot too much, but thinking with your city hat on and what economic development organizations could do to help cities that don't have full-time economic development teams. If you guys want to comment, or anybody else wants to comment on that question that Chris is asking.
Marcia, do you
Are
want
you
to
going-
start?
Yeah, so I can start a little bit. Chris, one of the things that we're doing at WFRC, just so you know, is I'm trying to put together a proposal. One of the things that you had said probably, I think, a couple of meetings ago is having access to data. And so I'm currently putting a proposal together for the EDA to hopefully share or get some money to be able to share that third-party data that's really hard to get and expensive, and it would be very difficult for a Morgan County or even Tooele County to pick up that data. The second thing that
Yeah, Marcia, let me just jump in on that data point too. For example, we keep a real estate database across our region for potentially commercial opportunities on land that, for example, might not even be zoned industrial office right now, but hopefully that's helpful to the local communities as well. But yeah, I'd love to see WFRC jump into that data game a little bit deeper if you have the resources, along with our group and EDC Utah and others to kind of help the local municipalities. So we keep that real estate database. We know that the local groups aren't going to have the resources to do that. And hopefully that would help along with what, eventually you guys could do too. So, good to hear.
Yeah. The other thing that we're doing is that I meet somewhat regularly with the county economic development individuals. So at least those individuals that are representing the counties, talking about county needs and what they're hearing. So although it's not ideal as far as being able to, get down to that city level, at least I know what Stephanie Russell's dealing with up in Weber, or, what's happening even in Box Elder. We've started to include Sean Milne in our group. So, and yeah, it's a difficult place to be in for sure from a city's perspective. But I don't have a good answer. Ted, maybe you can talk a little bit about the LAA program and what we're doing, but that doesn't even touch economic development. So,
Well, first, let me say, Chris, that's a tremendously good question. And it might be a question of, what do local governments need, and how can local governments help meet larger economic development objectives? I'll rephrase it, perhaps, is a great question for this group over time to address. And I guess what I would just add in is, I think local governments don't know what they don't know. And sometimes they're just focused on attracting development, especially retail, because it helps their city budget. And it's not the same thing as thinking about targeted industries and knowing what the specific needs are of a targeted industry, and understanding, well, what are the targeted industries that are the most attracted to any particular municipality, so they kind of understand, hey, what is a where should we be aiming, what's realistic, and as part of where we're aiming and what's realistic, what should we be doing, and answering those two kinds of questions within a broader perspective than simply attracting retail. But that's a lot to do for a community that might have a very limited staff. And it does beg this question of, how do they leverage their county economic development partners, entities like this, and other state economic development agencies? I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, no, Ted, I appreciate that. At least from our organization standpoint, maybe it would be good if we included a bunch of you all, into our quarterly meetings. We'd love to have WFRC there. I know EDCU reps can be there when they can, because there are a lot of resources that we collectively can bring to the table, either from a region, state, or a bigger region perspective to the local municipalities. So Marcia, I'll maybe circle back with you next time we have our quarterly meeting for the local cities, and for example, with Davis and Weber in our case, and include you and Sherry from the state and others, part of Scott's team, their research team, to come out and talk about what their research capabilities are. I think a lot of that combined and leveraged together can help those cities that don't necessarily have. I mean, that's just one thing I think we can do. We've been doing those quarterly meetings for a couple of years, so we're going to keep doing that. And if you guys have some other ideas, we're happy to jump in and help you as well. So, but Marcia, we'll try to include you guys in our next round of those. And I think we've done that in the past, but I think we can do better, be a little bit more organized that way.
That'd be great. Yeah.
Great. Thanks for that, Chris. Anyone else? Questions or comments before we move on? Marcia, maybe we can put this issue on the table for 2024. It's a critical issue. I know here in Weber County, our economic development person, Stephanie, reaches out to all the cities on at least a monthly, if not quarterly basis, and asks, what we could do as a county to offer our support, knowledge, whatever we may have. And again, the cities, in all due respect, just a lot of times, Ogden City is a different story, but all the smaller cities just don't have the resources to put a full-time person on. So we might be able to do a better job through WFRC and the Northern Utah Economic Alliance, doing some reach out and explaining some opportunities that they may have. So with that, if there's no other questions or comments on that agenda item, let's go to our Davis Tech Business and Economic Development Overview, custom fit process that we're probably familiar with. Amanda Tullis joins us today. Very fortunate to have her. She serves as the Associate Vice President of Business and Economic Development for Davis Tech. Most of us know her. She serves on our board. She gets involved with the Northern Utah Economic Alliance. In addition to serving as the Associate Vice President of Business and Economic Development, she really is out in the community. She's a dynamic leader that really works to inspire others. She has her own private company. She's CEO or the founder of the organization Lead to Action. It's an organization that is working to inspire others to realize their potential. So we're really excited to hear from Amanda and Davis Tech and what they're doing in the job creation that we see happening in Davis, northern Utah. Amanda, appreciate your being with us. Time's yours.
Thanks, Commissioner. Appreciate being here with all of you. It's good to see so many familiar faces, and I want to shout out to Marcia for her tenacity on connecting with me until we were able to make this happen. So thank you, Marcia. Okay, I think I've shared my screen. Can everyone see? Are we good to go? Okay. So I just want to take a minute and just do some reminders of what we are all about here at Davis Tech. Davis Technical College has been around for 45 years and started as a vocational training school and has evolved with the community and the economic development needs of our community to support that labor workforce through education of tech training, technical skills, and trades. We currently have 35 programs at Davis Tech. We just opened our 35th program of commercial driver's licensing, and that is in progress. And we are very grateful that actually came to fruition because of some money through Talent Ready Utah. So we were able to get that off the ground quicker than we would have even hoped. So our mission is to be a trusted learning community, embracing technical education to promote student development and economic growth. So you can see that right there in our mission, we talk about our piece and our part and how important training individuals is to economic development and the growth and the good things that we do. Scott talked a lot about the great work and the statistics of how we compare against other states. And a lot of that is our focus in Utah. We are committed to education, and Davis Tech is a part of that commitment. Just to give you a little bit of demographic information, I think we hear sometimes we tend to call our students the kids, but it's not necessarily that they are kids. We are 75% adult and 25% high school. And that number that you see is we have a laser focus right now on two main things: access to technical education and graduation. And that number of total students is actually climbing far closer to 7,000 students at the moment. So we are continuously refining how we advertise and recruit students to be able to offer that. Sorry, I'm in a borrowed office. I'm at McCady Hospital, so phones are ringing and I don't know how to do anything about it. So excuse me for that. Anyway, that's some of our demographic, and then just kind of broken down by age and gender here. So we still are a little male dominant, which is common for trade schools, but we are continuing to recruit and to share with our female students the opportunities that the trades can bring them. And then just as a reminder, I think this is critical to this group here. The all-in cost is under $3,000 for the educations that we provide at Davis Tech. And the increase in wage, so this is minus what they have paid to become a student. But that number down at the bottom, that cumulative ROI of just under $9 million is part of our contribution to the economic impact of the state through wage enhancement from completion of programs at Davis Tech. One of the newest things that is happening, and this is because we used to have our own governing board with technical education, as did university. And a couple of years ago, we all combined. And you can see on here, we talk about 900 hours. I think the majority of us are very familiar with credits. And we are now converting slowly so that all types of higher education will be credit earning, which makes it so much more seamless for students as they continue on, because tech ed is not always a one and done. A lot of times it's not or university, it's and university. And this enhances that opportunity for students who have the desire and the ability to move forward. So I am, as Commissioner mentioned, I am over business and economic development for the college. So I'm not student-centric and student-facing. So the work that I do every day is on the business side, and we support the businesses in Davis and Morgan County, and we host the Davis Chamber of Commerce, which, as you all know, is led by Angie Osgathorpe. And she doesn't report to me, but we have the great partnership of having them in our building, which is such a powerful, it's a powerful friendship and marriage and relationship that we have with them to be able to be a one-stop shop in this community for people that are running businesses. So we host the custom fit funding for Davis and Morgan counties, and I am going to get a little bit deeper into that in the future, but these are just some of the numbers from our last fiscal year. Just coming out of this one little building in Kaysville. So almost with our Small Business Development Center, for those that may or may not be familiar, that's an SBA program. So it's a national program to support small businesses. And there are not charges. We do not charge clients for that. And with those that we serve, we have 1.5 consultants that work in our Kaysville Business Resource Center, and those numbers are populated from the team that we have. So that almost 20 million in increased revenue and capital infusion. And as you all know, when you survey people, that's only the information we're getting back. So we know that there's even greater impact happening. And we have the privilege of serving both Davis and Morgan County, as I mentioned, and we try to make sure that we give access to everyone to have these access to funds and to the consulting to help with small businesses. So Marcia asked me to focus on a couple of different economic development priorities that marry up with the things that this group is focused on. And one of those is how we help the gaps in hiring that face so many of the businesses who are working in the state of Utah, specifically in our community. Technical education is driven by the employers in our region. So we have employer visits are a huge focus of our faculty and staff, so that we are able to connect with them and verbally hear from them what's working and what's not. As opposed to different types of training and education, tech ed, our accrediting body requires us to have that information so that we are constantly evolving as technical skills and those trades evolve. So we're not teaching old things on old equipment. We are teaching the newest, latest, and greatest to keep people turnkey ready to enter those jobs. And part of the way we do that is through what we call occupational advisory committees. These help us ensure that our programs continue to be market driven and that we're responsive. And kind of reiterating what I was saying, we will change that curriculum in as soon as we are able to, because we want to ensure that relevant current practice is taught. We also survey for those that aren't able to serve on our occupational advisory committees. We are very in tune and in connection with the companies that serve all of our trade industries. We send follow-up surveys for those who hire our students to see how the training ended up, because sometimes what we think we want them trained on and then what we need them to know when they get there can be a little bit different. So that's one of our focuses, is making sure that we adapt. And then we take that feedback back to our programs and have them make corrections. And then, not on the student side, but this fear of the unknown, I want to address that a little bit with you today, because this is more feedback from our small business community. The gap in hiring, sometimes they're gun shy. We have a tendency to hire our friends and family first. A, we think they'll be cheaper, but B, we don't think they'll sue us, right? We're hoping that that's the case. And sometimes our smaller companies are hesitant to grow because of the risks that can become theirs when they decide to take on employees. There's certainly so many different things that you can get in trouble for doing things wrong, and there's not always great knowledge. Most of the time, the small businesses that are started because I don't want to work for somebody else, but I can do this myself, or I see a problem that I have a solution for. But none of that means I know how to operate a business, and I'm certainly not fluent in HR law. So we do see a little bit of resistance to that, and that's where the small business development centers can be very critically helpful. We can connect them with information that they may not already have and help them avoid pitfalls. So I think one of the things that we can continue to do in economic development is push people towards utilizing the services that are free of charge at small business development centers. Like I said, that's a national program, and they are dotted throughout the entire state of Utah. And I think a lot of times people assume that is a startup focus, and that isn't the case. That's a misconception of the services that we provide. a business is considered small until they have over 500 employees. So many of the companies that we are working every day have access to the services of the SBDC. So I encourage us to go back and continue to use them in a bigger way. Hindrances into getting people into talent. This is something, if you're out visiting with businesses at all, everybody seems to be facing this issue, don't they? One of the things that we face at Davis Tech in technical education is the stigma associated with tech jobs. I want different for my kids, but that doesn't necessarily need to be the case. There is quite a bit of profitability that comes from having a trade career. And we all want homes and buildings, and all of these different things are required for us to have that. Tech colleges are also often perceived as not really being colleges, which isn't true. As you'll know, remember that I just mentioned a minute ago, we report to the same governing body, the Utah System of Higher Education, as the universities. So it really truly is higher ed. And as I mentioned before, this movement from tracking the education, we used to be clock hour. So we would say each of our programs is X amount of hours. And now all of it will be under credit based. And that I think will help calm that disruption just a little bit. Scott mentioned this in his presentation as well. When it comes to limited resources, one of the barriers to getting people into these talent pipelines is childcare. And we don't have childcare at Davis Tech, but that is a problem that we are facing and could use everyone's help and advocacy around. A lot of times our population is the workforce wanting to train themselves into new skills so they have new opportunities with employment. And with working parents that don't have access to childcare, this is a huge hindrance to them entering and attaining higher education. I get the misunderstanding of future opportunities. There's again kind of tied to stigma. There's a lot of guardians and parents that don't believe that kids that graduate through tech ed can actually make it on their own and be successful. So that's one of the things that we are constantly trying to remind people of, and can always use all of our friends in economic development, reminding that there are incredible wages. 6 figures are not uncommon for many of our program graduates. So it really is a sustainable, a lifelong opportunity to graduate from a tech school. I think one of the things we get brought opportunities a lot, saying this is a need where our workforce is aging out, and all these different professions. But what we've come to find is, as we dive in and research, for instance, we hear often about flooring install, that we all are going to need floors, whether that's new construction or remodel. But things that there's not licensing required, we have a tendency to have people not necessarily look and seek out that type of training. So there's some opportunity for us as a state to reassess. I know sometimes it sounds like, the big brother evil of trying to get things regulated through licensure, but really licensure can also help expand the opportunities and the commitment from employers and the enticement of future workforce, because of that regulation. So we see that happen a lot. And another thing, we can in technical schools, we can have undocumented or those without citizenship. They can pursue the education, but a lot of times, due to licensing requirements, they aren't able to achieve that licensure. So there's a little bit of both sides of the fence when it comes to licensure that I think that we can all work towards coming up with solutions. Probably the greatest thing that we face when it comes to hindrances for that talent pipeline is employer impatience. We all know how desperate people have been and continue to be for employees. And sometimes they will hire them out of programs before they finish. We do, of course, encourage them to commit until they are able to complete programs, because we all know, specifically in this group, that the data shares with us that those who have credentials, that's directly tied to the earning power lifetime. So we need people to stay focused on that big picture. Tech ed doesn't take very long, and that commitment and being a little bit more patient in that space is very helpful. We also wanted to just kind of review, let's see, my slide won't advance. Trainings that we see from a custom fit perspective. We see a lot of requests for leadership and organizational development. In fact, 55% of our funds are in this space, because what we are learning is communication is a huge barrier to our workforce. Leadership 101, time management, generational differences. These are all things that companies are quickly realizing it's different than it used to be. And there is a direct need for this type of training. And we also, under organizational development, these can be, they're not necessarily soft skills, but things such as learning Microsoft Excel in a deeper, better way. Those all fall under organizational development. And then we see a lot of continuing education and those that are in those licensure fields. 29% of our funds go to help with that. So that to me is a real positive. We want to make sure that those that are in manufacturing, construction, healthcare, and other regulated fields continue to stay relevant and licensed to keep our workforce going. On the student side, the programmatic side of Davis Tech, we have employers who will send, sometimes this is something that's not well known, so I think it's good for us to talk about, but we will have employers send employees into some of our training programs that they're not looking for a certificate. They're looking to obtain specific skill sets that we teach. And we do have a la carte style options where you can come in and take the training from the program that you need, even if you're not a certificate seeker. We call those occupational upgrades, and it helps keep your workforce trained on the newest, latest, and greatest, and helps provide them with the ability to expand the jobs that they are in. And then just kind of an interesting note, because we are up here and supporting Hill Air Force Base. We have 5 of our different programs. We develop specific curriculum to support the base. So we do training. We train the trainers in essence for the 367th. And they bring people from all over the country just to get those specific skills. So kind of like I was talking about with employers just looking for certain things. We have off the shelf, and then we have custom that we're able to do, and not everyone necessarily is aware of that. Okay, the last thing that I wanted to go over at Marcia's request is an understanding of custom fit. And we made a video. It's a little goofy and a little cheeky, but it really does help outline what custom fit is made for, because there's a lot of misunderstandings. It is not tailored men's suits, which is probably the most common misconception. Custom fit has nothing to do with clothing. It is a legislative appropriation that is regionally distributed to help with the funding of training to keep our workforce relevant, which I commend our state for having a program like this. Many states do not. And it shows, again, that continued investment in higher education and what that means to us as a state. So I'm going to play this quick video for you.
We're Custom Fit. What's Custom Fit, you might ask? It's training customized to fit your business needs. The needs of every business is different, so we custom fit the training you need most. We assist in funding training for employees tailored to meet business-specific needs. Custom Fit is a state resource to support businesses and strengthen Utah's economy. It's tax dollars coming back to bolster business. Bet you didn't see that coming, but if you did, still act surprised. We put a lot of effort into this. Thank you. We work with new and existing businesses to aid in their growth year to year. Industry is constantly evolving, which means training of new and current skill sets must also evolve. Get it? Industry constantly evolves because he has an old block phone. Now it's a smartphone. Look, I can't explain every one of these to you. You just got to keep up. Anyways, back to the script. Like I was saying, business, technology, and skill sets must evolve. And this is where Custom Fit fits in. Nice, huh? So to sum up, your training needs plus our funding equals big results. So let's say you're a new business. It's up and coming. Your employees are trained in their field, but require more advanced, up-to-date skill sets beyond their current capabilities. You need to get your people trained and fast. Or maybe you're an established business and you're ready to expand. You've got a new management team ready to move forward, but they need additional leadership training. Or perhaps the employees need further technical skills, certifications, or just updated knowledge. If it enhances business, use Custom Fit. Did we mention we fund up to 40% of the training costs? That's rhetorical. I know I haven't mentioned it. I was just trying to get your attention. More to the point, it's true, and it gets better. If employees need to attend a seminar, conference, workshop, or custom build a training, Custom Fit is ready to help. If you are a for-profit company, register with Custom Fit today, and let's elevate your business together. See, because it's an elevator. That's ours. Your business is inside of it. We're going up. This is exciting.
All right, a little cheeky, but it gets your attention, right? We appreciate that we have the opportunity to share that video with all of you because it's a very simple program. If you're a for-profit company, you need to contact your region, and if you're your regional manager, and it's a fairly streamlined process. We try very hard to not make it egregious so that we can get those trainings to you. But just kind of an overview of that program, it's meant to train employees. And it's not about what I think they need, it's about what they tell me they need. We can cover up to 50% of the training costs. And obviously this supports workforce development and our economy. And the purpose is to facilitate retention and creation of new jobs. So it's one of those really awesome under advertised programs that hopefully each of you is familiar with. And if today serves as a reminder for you to talk to people about it, that would be great. We would love that. The great thing about Custom Fit is every for-profit company in the state has access to it. The monies are divided up regionally. So it's based on where the headquarters of your location, your company's location is. I can direct anybody to wherever it is that they need to go, as can everyone else in the program. So that's what Davis Tech is doing. Just a small glimpse and fraction of what it is that we are doing to kind of to do our part for economic development. So thank you so much for the opportunity to chat with all of you about this. Commissioner, anything else?
Thank you, Amanda. Great presentation. Loved your video on Custom Fit. I think some people just didn't quite understand what it's about, but it's really is a great program for the entire state. Davis Tech and Ogden Tech use it very well. With that, any questions for Amanda?
Yeah, Commissioner Chris Roybal, I hate to keep jumping in here, but Amanda, good job. We always brag about the Custom Fit training program, but my sense is there's a cap on it, I believe, of 50,000 per company. So for small companies, my guess is it works really well. For big companies that are hiring 50, 100, 200 and up, we're not covering that much. My question for you is, do we have as much funding in that program as we really need? And could we use more? I know you guys are always back at the legislature. Commissioner Furr, you may have a beat on this too, but should we be asking for this program to be bigger? Are we running out of money? It seems like we're a little underfunded for some of the bigger projects where we, want to hire 50, 100, 200 people. That cap runs into a little bit of an issue. Can you maybe extrapolate a little bit on that?
So let me just a clarification. The $50,000 cap is not per company to be able to use. That's how much Custom Fit will pay a single vendor in a fiscal year. And there's some opportunities for us to work within that. We just may have to go to RFP. We work with some of the biggest companies in Davis County on a regular basis. What it may mean, Chris, is that they don't always get as much money because they may have bigger training needs. But I think it would be long-term goals. I think it would be very impactful for us to have that conversation and put together these bigger companies that haven't necessarily accessed it in a while. They certainly can now, and we can just look at it case by case. But if we need to go back and we believe as a community that we need more funding, I think we can make a really great argument. And let's talk about what some of those bigger companies that haven't been using the dollars, what their needs would look like. And let's just make sure it makes sense. And then we would take it forth. So I think there's lots of opportunity to grow it if we would like to.
Does that answer your question, Chris? I think that's a great subject to talk about as the funding session comes up in the legislature. If there's more money actually, if more money would help the program. I don't think you have anybody better to promote that than Amanda and Davis and Ogden Tech and Northern Utah Economic Alliance. So, Chris,
Yeah,
anything else?
I think I would love to see that. Maybe, Amanda, we look at some case studies of where companies have just sometimes companies would just shy away because they think there's just not enough resource there to cover what their needs are. Great program, but I'd like to look at some of these bigger expansions and see if we, miss an opportunity. And sometimes when we're recruiting companies, we miss an opportunity to really sell that as part of the whole incentive package because maybe the resource isn't quite big enough. And, I mean, everybody loves people upgrading their skill set, regardless of whether it's an existing company or new company. So it's very, very popular. And, I don't know what the appetite is of the legislature to increase that kind of funding, but seems like it would be pretty popular.
I think if we brought forward case studies, that certainly enhances the opportunity and the request. So yeah, let's chat offline about that. And if anybody else wants to be part of that, let Chris or I know. Be happy to.
That'd be great, Amanda, if you wouldn't mind looking at some case studies on that. Great. All right. Anyone else? Comments or questions for Amanda? Seeing none.
Hey, Amanda, just
go ahead.
Just real quick, I have a question for you about internships. Do you ever do have students that want to do internships or anything like that?
It depends on the program, but yes, we work with students and employers. We have a work study program. We have a lot of externships because when you do technical skills, a lot of time you need an externship. So it's very much a program by program basis. But yes, we are totally open and willing. So if you have people that have needs in that space, always reach out.
Maybe economic development.
Yeah, right?
Just going back to what Chris said.
Good example. All right, Amanda, thank you very much for that great presentation. Andrew, any final comments before we move on regarding that presentation or anything else?
No, no other than I also appreciate Amanda sharing. I will say that I learned a lot today, Amanda, about the work that you're doing. And this is candidly, it's a little bit outside of the realm of what we at WFRC normally do, but really important to have that information and see how that we're working together. So Marcia, thanks for setting that up. And Amanda, you said at the beginning, most of these people. You and I don't know each other, so I'm in the minority here. I'm happy to learn a lot more about you. So thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Amanda's a great resource, so take advantage of it, Andrew, when you can. All right, Marcia, any final comments, questions?
No, Commissioner, I think it's back to you and to take it on home.
All right. Well, I appreciate great presentations by both Scott and Amanda. That was information I'm sure we can take forward and use in this upcoming year as we move forward for economic development. As you may or may not be aware, we're changing, I think Marcia mentioned, changing the days in 2024 to Tuesdays. Is that right, Marcia? We better make that afternoon since some of us have commission meetings on Tuesday mornings, but I'm sure we can work that out. There will be a new member orientation on February 22nd, 2024, and our next WFEEDD meeting will be on March 12th. Is that correct, Marcia? March 12th.
That is correct.
Will that be an in-person and online, or do you have a plan on that?
At this point, it will be most likely an in-person,
Okay.
but always we usually offer a hybrid option. So we'd
I'll
love to get together. Part of what we like to do is network and be able to talk and get some ideas between each of us. So that's why it's always fun to have an in-person meeting.
Yeah, I think we can get people into tune, and I think everybody's a little bit more receptive to in-person meetings. Hopefully in 2024, we'll have even a greater opportunity to do that. So with that, any additional comments from anybody online before we adjourn? Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great holiday. So our final action would be a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you,
Ginger.
Thanks, Ginger. Did we have a second?
I'll second. This is Christina Oliver.
Thank you, Christine. All right, we got a motion non-debatable. All those in favor say aye. Have a great holiday.
Aye.
We're now adjourned.
Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.